There you are, riding high off a great and engaging lesson. When you see it, report cards are due. Do you have your grades together? Have your students submitted all of their work? Is there any hope of catching up? Let's face it, the end of the grading period can be a very stressful time. Administrators are trying to make sure that the report cards get out, students are getting nervous about their grades, parents are eagerly anticipating their child's performance, and then there's you, the teacher, scrambling around trying to make sure that your grades get entered on time. But there's good news. With a little bit of preparation and organization, you can save a lot of stress and wasted time. There's an old saying, a stitch in time saves 9. Well, today, in less than 30 minutes, we are going to give you several ways that you can prepare for report card season that will save you not only time, but also help you to avoid any unnecessary stressors. Let's get started. One thing I really took pride in as a teacher was getting my grades in on time. I used several strategies to make this happen, many of which we're going to share with you today. But one thing that I hadn't thought about was student accountability, which in retrospect is kind of odd because I felt like I was always having the same exact conversation a dozen times over at the end of the grading period. A student would come in and they would say, "Mr. Pope, what can I do to raise my grade?" And the answer was nearly always the same. Turn in your missing work. I mean, zeros have a huge impact on grades. Let's do the math. Say you have a student who has a 95, a 90, a 85, and a 0. If you add them all up, divide by 4, now your AB student suddenly has a 67.5, a D. So the rest of that exchange with the student would go something like this. "So Mr. Pope, what you're saying is if I turn in those missing assignments, my grades will go up?" And I would say, "Yeah, I mean, they're having a huge impact on you right now." And they would say, "So can you tell me what I'm missing?" And I would tell them, and then they would stare at me blankly. They would look into the void that is their book bag where nothing ever seems to return. And they would say, "Can I get another copy of that assignment?" Then before I knew it, I was spending so much of my planning period waiting in line at the copier to make another copy of these assignments instead of getting my own grading completed. So to save myself time, what I did was I created student missing work folders. So anytime they were absent or didn't turn in homework, I took a copy of that assignment, I put it in the folder with their name in it, and then I placed it in my filing cabinet. They always knew where it was. So when it came time for the end of the grading period and a student would come in, that's the first place I would direct them. And it saved me a lot of time. So let's take a look at this. So when you're thinking about organizing makeup work for your students, most teachers are going to gravitate towards the filing cabinet. It's easy. It's usually in most classrooms. Students are familiar with getting materials out of it. It's convenient with the drawer opening and closing. Hangers fit right into it. A lot of these hanging folders will come with plastic inserts where you can put your students' names on it, alphabetize them, stick them back in the filing cabinet, and then label it so students know exactly where to go for their makeup work. But maybe you don't have a filing cabinet. Maybe you need some sort of alternate storage solution. A lot of people don't know this, but the standard size hanging folder will fit a wide range of different containers. One of those is a plastic container like we have here that you can find at like big box stores or office stores. They fit right into there, no problem, just like you're using your regular filing cabinet. But if you don't have access to one of those, maybe you have access to a milk carton or egg crate. A lot of times you can get these at supply at your school. You can talk to your janitor. Maybe there's some in the storage closet. These have a lip that actually run along the inside of it that your folders will also fit on perfectly. But say you don't have access to either one of these things, you don't want to go out, you don't have a big budget, so you don't want to spend money on getting one of these types of containers, you can find a cardboard box, something that you can pick up at a lot of stores that have excess of these. Just make sure that you're getting the right size, once again, and then your hanging folders will fit perfectly on there. Another reason I like the cardboard box is that it's light, it's easily movable. So if you're teaching, different classes during the day, you have a first period, second period, third period. As soon as one class ends, take the box, move it out of the way, move the next class's box in with the makeup work, and you're ready to go. One of the reasons that teachers stress out so much during report cards is they have to make sure to get all their grades finalized and entered on time. So here are our top tips to prevent you from struggling to enter your grades at the last minute. Number 5, as the English author Douglas Adams once wrote, don't panic. When you get upset, you start expending your mental energy on worrying rather than getting the job done. Number 4, create a timeline for yourself. For me, I like to have my grades entered every single Thursday. Therefore, the furthest I could ever possibly be behind would be 1 week. Number 3, you don't have to grade everything. Think about your assignments. What truly shows student ability, and what did you use just to find a hole in your instruction? Just remember that all your summative assessments should always be entered. Number 2, determine what and how much you're going to grade in advance. So if you're looking at your assignments for next week, say yourself, I want to grade 1 individual assignment, 1 group assignment, participation grade, and I also want to grade a quiz, and then stick to it for every single student. Number 1, create rubrics, especially when you're grading long writing assignments. These can help speed up your grading time and also help you to eliminate subjectivity. So there's a lot more to talk about rubrics, and so we're going to go to Ryan to talk about how powerful rubrics can be. Ryan, thanks for joining us to talk a little bit about rubrics today.
Great to be here.
Before we get into the benefits of rubrics for teachers, how can they help students?
Yeah, they are really helpful for students, and I think they're a natural complement to I can statements. I can statements tell the student what they need to learn, where a rubric tells a student what they need to produce, right, to show that they learned it. So they're super helpful.
Great, yes, sets out those clear expectations.
Right.
So I know sometimes when you get that stack of essays and you start grading them and reading through them, after a while they start to kind of blend in together.
They do, yeah.
How can a rubric help us with that?
Well, they keep you objective as you're grading. I think it's a human tendency as you're reading so much, depending how big that stack is, you start to find yourself swaying in one direction or another. And a rubric helps you just stick to the facts of that you've already laid out. And more importantly, I think as a professional teacher, it's really important to have that objective evidence to talk with parents about later, especially when it comes, report card, conference time. You can sit that down and say, here's what needed to be shown, and here's what your student produced.
Great. Now, rubrics sound, really helpful, but it also seems like it might be a little bit time consuming to create one. And I think one of our objectives here today is to save teachers time.
Right, yeah, it does seem a little counterintuitive right there, but it's important to remember with a rubric, if you really figure out what kind of rubric you need and you get better at it, if you spend 20 good minutes creating the rubric before you start grading or before you give the assignment, you'll find you get about double that back when you go to grading. And that really is because it keeps you efficient. It keeps you looking through that big stack pretty quickly, and you're not really wondering, is this proficient? Is it not? You simply look at your tool that you made and you keep going.
Yeah, well, great. Thank you for sharing that. And now we're going to go speak with Heather, who's going to give us the ingredients for a good, simple, easy-to-use rubric. Thank you for joining us on LYC, Heather.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Kyle.
It's great. So, I'm looking at all this food that you've brought here, and I'm super excited about it. But I have to ask you, what does this have to do with rubrics?
Sure. Well, Kyle, rubrics are a lot like a recipe. If you use simple, quality ingredients, it's going to turn out well. So let's go over what we need in order to make a rubric work. The first thing we need for a successful rubric is range. So similar to how grades range from A to F, our rubrics also need to reflect the well below standard performance to exceeding performance because all levels of work are possible. So can you please hand me the berries?
Sure.
All right. So this assortment of berries represents the array of outcomes on a rubric. So the next ingredient that we need for a successful rubric is point values. And so now that we have our range, we need point values associated with each performance level that are constant across performance descriptions. What this means is you don't want any large gaps between points, just like you don't want any large chunks in your smoothie. The next thing we need for our rubric is descriptors. So descriptors need to be observable and measurable to reflect student action and achievement. And so just like yogurt, our rubric has standards. And so just like the standards of pasteurization and bacterial culture control make yogurt possible. Lastly, your rubric needs to have reliability for all of your students and, if possible, for other teachers to use on the same assignment. So your rubric needs to be consistent with no surprises, just like this even, smooth, creamy peanut butter. Okay, Kyle, now that we have all of the ingredients for our rubric, let's put them together.
Thanks, Heather.
Cheers.
That's a good smoothie, and it makes for a pretty good rubric too. So if you would like a simple, easy to use rubric from EPI, please click the link in the description section below. One of the other stressors at the end of the grading period can be dealing with upset parents. Generally speaking, parents are concerned about their child's education, which is great, but sometimes they don't know where to place the blame, which is why it's important for us to make every effort to provide frequent and clear communication, or else you may end up in a situation like this. Hello, it's Mr. Pope.
Pope! This is Gaspar, Jasper's father. He brought home his report card today, and you gave him a C.
Well, Gaspar, father of Jasper, actually earned a C this quarter.
But I thought he was doing well. How is this the first I'm hearing about it? What's the deal?
Now, what could I do? I really needed to use a parent contact log. A parent contact log is a very simple way to track parent interactions and make sure that you are keeping them informed of their child's performance. The primary information you'll want to record is the student's name, the parent or guardian's name, the date of contact or attempted contact, the form of contact, such as an email or a phone call, and any important details discussed. Every time you speak with a parent or guardian, make sure that you immediately fill out the log. Now, let's put it into action. Hello, it's Mr. Pope.
Pope! This is Gaspar, Jasper's dad. Jasper brought home his report card today, and you gave him a C in math. Why is this the first I'm hearing about it?
Hey Gaspar, hold on and let me pull up my contact log real quick. Oh yeah, it says right here we just spoke last week about his missing assignments. Those zeros are really hurting his grade.
All right. I remember now. Jasper, have you turned them all in yet?
I'm working on them, Dad. I'll have them done real soon.
Hey, that's great. As soon as the assignments are turned in, I'll update both of you guys on the new grade.
Thanks, Mr. Pope.
That went a lot better, thanks to the parent contact log.
Sometimes it's impossible to avoid stressful situations. In small doses, stress can help us buckle down and get things done, but also may derail carefully laid plans. Getting through periods of short-term, intense stress is about creating a sustainable balance between periods of work and relief. Before reaching crunch time, formulate a stress relief plan that you can stick to when the demands of work and life intensify. When you anticipate a stressful situation come up, one of the most important things you can do is build in the time for breaks. Be it keeping your typical gym schedule, incorporating time to take a walk, or visiting a friend, don't sacrifice that me time. These built-in breaks give you an outlet to look forward to when you know times will be tough. Also, lean into social support. If other teachers at your school or members of the community will be going through the same situation, such as planning an event or gearing up for end-of-year exams, reach out. Call a friend to chat, send an email of support, or schedule a time to work on your tasks together. Finding support with people who know what you're going through can help make your challenge seem less daunting. Finally, take a step back and identify what tends to be the major source of your stress. Is it calling parents or grading essays? Find out what gets under your skin the most and make a plan early before you find yourself putting the dreaded task off until it's too late. All of these techniques will help you form ongoing habits to manage unavoidable stress before it becomes overwhelming and lead to a more resilient frame of mind.
Thank you for that great advice, Amanda.
It's always a pleasure.
Great. So, I know this episode we've been talking a lot about preparation and getting ready for report cards, but I'm sure there's probably some teachers out there who might not have done any preparation yet. What would you say to them if they feel like they're drowning?
I would say you're not going through this alone, right? There are all the teachers in your school have to also produce report cards and have experience with it. So I would say go to one of them and ask them their advice. And the question I would lead with is, what should be my number one priority? Because you have a lot of work ahead of you. So it can be good to break it down into, okay, this is the most important thing, and then this comes next. And then that way you can make it feel more manageable.
Yeah, take pieces of it instead of looking at it at the whole. Yeah, great. So I know as teachers, sometimes we live under constant stress, and then all of a sudden here comes report cards, and we're like, that's one more thing. So how can we keep it in perspective?
I like that word perspective because it really is about how you look at it and how you frame it. Report card time, it ends, right? It's not going to be your constant state of being as a teacher. So try and just remember that, especially when you're in the thick of it. And sometimes stress can help us buckle down and get done what we need to get done. But don't let that mean that you are sacrificing everything that gives you stress relief. If you like to go for long walks, if you like spending time with your family or exercising, make sure that you're still building in that me time so that you have that outlet, even if you do have to spend a little bit less time on it.
Yeah. So report card time can be stressful for us, and sometimes it can be really stressful for students too. So is there a way that we can help students kind of manage that stress or help alleviate it?
I think that a lot of that fear or stress on the part of the students comes from the unknown, right? For them, report cards can seem kind of threatening in a way. So be as transparent as you can with your students about your process, and also keep your door open figuratively. Tell them that there's a time they can come talk to you about their grades or about anything so that they feel they can address any concerns that they have with you. And finally, remind them that report cards, they are a measure of progress as a student, but it's not a judgment of their character or if they're a good or a bad person. And that no matter the grade on a report card, there's always a way to move forward productively.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Grades provide a measurement of performance in the classroom. At their best, they're both a reflection of hard work and mastery of content. Therefore, grades, rightly so, carry a lot of weight. And as long as there are report cards, there's also always going to be some level of anxiety. But as long as you stay on top of your grading, help your students to eliminate zeros, and clearly communicate with parents, you can help to reduce the amount of stress that you're likely to encounter. So I encourage you to get organized and prepared and make sure your next end of grading period is an easy one. Thank you, and I hope you'll join us for the Q&A.
All right. Thanks to our great audience for watching and for the really insightful questions we've been getting in the chat, on our social media channels, and through email. We're going to answer as many of these as we can today. Remember, if you have any questions about getting prepared for the end of the grading period, put them in the chat and we'll answer them live. Joining us today for the Q&A is, as always, the host of Launch Your Classroom Live, Kyle Pope. Kyle, thanks for the great tips, and how did that rubric taste?
Hey, it definitely met my standards.
All right. And also joining us today is the co-host of Launch Your Classroom and EPI's Director of Program Services, Ryan Hennessy. Thanks for joining us, Ryan.
My pleasure. I didn't get to try the rubric, but I'm glad it met your standards.
All right, let's take a look at our first question. Stephanie asks, can rubrics be used in pre-K? Ryan?
Hey, Stephanie, great question. I think that you can use a rubric in pre-K. I think the important thing to remember about rubrics is not so much the age of the student, but it's really about whether or not you have standards in those pre-K classes. For me, any set of standards, processes, skills that you are instructing, a rubric is a great way to just judge whether or not your students have met it, and that could be pre-kindergarten or elementary or beyond. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Ryan. Our next question is coming in, and Margaret wants to know, should I still enter grades for a summative assessment that many students fail? Kyle, what do you think?
Thanks, Margaret. Honestly, I wouldn't recommend it because something along the process went wrong. Maybe the test questions didn't accurately measure what you had taught them. Maybe the standards didn't completely align to the test. Maybe some of the assignments were a little too difficult and there needed to be some differentiation. But something went wrong along the way, so it'd be a time for you to go back and diagnose that problem, try to figure out why so many students failed it, and then work to fix that problem and alleviate it, and then give them a different assessment that more fairly tests their abilities. Thank you.
All right. Up next, we've got Damia, who wants to know, if I give students the rubric ahead of time, isn't that like giving them the answers to a test? That seems like cheating. Ryan, is that cheating?
No, it isn't cheating. I can understand a little bit how it could feel uncomfortable until you get used to it. But Damia, great question. Here's what I would suggest. Instead of viewing it as possibly giving them an answer, look at it like this. You're giving them a very, very clear checklist of what they need to show you that they can do. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be able to do it. You're just making it completely clear, hey, if you want to show me you've got control of this skill, here's how to do it. Thanks.
All right, and thank you, Ryan. Our next question comes in from Samantha. Are rubrics only used for project assignments? Kyle?
Yeah, so when you're thinking about rubrics here, you can use them for a multitude of things. So you can definitely use them for project assignments. It's really good for that, like you said. But you can also use them for essays. I used them a lot for historical essays when I was teaching and found it to be really effective. Any time you're going to have either multiple parts to an assignment or a long writing assignment, that's when I find that rubrics are the most useful. Thanks, Amanda.
Okay, and thank you, Kyle. We've got another question coming in here. This one is from Noor. The missing work folder is a great idea, but I give most of my assignments online. Is there a way I can still make this work? Kyle?
Yeah, thanks, Noor. Absolutely. So go ahead and print out something that says missing assignments on it, and then go ahead and make your folders like you normally would. And then instead of putting a physical copy of the assignment in there because you're doing it online, instead write the online assignment in that paper that you're going to put in the missing student folder. It could say something like Google Classroom assignment number 3, and that way they'll know that that's missing, and the student can go back into that folder and check it off when they finished it and turned it into you online, and that way they can keep up with the missing work still. Thanks for the question.
Okay. Up next is Petrona. How do I make a rubric for a child writing tasks, a child who can't read and all they do is draw to express their thoughts?
Hey, Petrona, I really can identify with this question, having taught young children. And so in this one, obviously you have a lot of challenges, right? You've got a child that you've asked to do a writing task. They are not currently able to decode text, it looks like. and they can't encode, meaning that they cannot write the thoughts they are drawing. So in this case, Petrona, here's what I would do first. I would work with the child to make sure, maybe in a small discussion setting, maybe you and the child, and if the child has any special education teacher involved, I would sit down and say, here's what we're going to do. Remember how we discussed this, and this, and then show them the rubric and say, right here in this box, I want you to draw, and then you need to verbally explain it to them. So let's say you were doing, maybe you were doing the phases of a story, or retelling, or summarizing. You say, okay, right here I want you to draw what you know about the beginning of the story. And this one do the middle, and here do the end. Something like that. Petrona, the key here would be small, short meeting with the student, verbally leading them through it, and allowing that child to express what they know at the highest level that they're able to. Great question.
And a great answer. So next we've got Edward, who wants to know, the other two teachers in my department always have more grades than me. Is that a negative?
Not necessarily, Edward. So the first thing you need to do is check with your administration or coworkers and find out if there's sort of a policy or expectation of how many grades that you need to have in given a week or grading period. If there's no set standard, then just know that some teachers are going to naturally grade more than others. The main thing to keep in mind here is that you want to accurately show student ability and growth over time. So you need to take as many grades as necessary to do that. Just to provide you kind of a rule of thumb for myself, I always made sure that I had 4 grades in a week. That's not a hard, fast rule. You know, some teachers may put in 2 and some teachers may put in 6. But also consider like what type of work that you're having them do. Like if you're having them do a project that's very in-depth, that might be the only grade that goes into your grade book that week, but it's more meaningful. They've spent more time on it. So those are just some factors to keep in mind when you're thinking about how many grades you should enter. Thank you.
All right, Ryan, I've got one here for you. Beth wants to know, are comments required in every report card?
Hey, Beth, as far as whether or not they are required, that is usually determined by a school district or a principal. But here's my suggestion. I suggest that you do put a comment on every single student's report card. Now, I'm not saying that some of the comments need to be very, very long. Sometimes you may just have a little bit to say, and that's okay. And of course, some of those comments you're going to need to go a little more in depth. However, I do think it is a worthwhile way to quickly build rapport and communication between yourselves and the parent, guardians, to just take a little time and comment in all the right places, right, for every subject, maybe in those behavior areas. And I think that'll help you a lot too when you get into those parent conferences. Thanks, Beth.
Okay, we've got another question coming in now, I see. This one's from Umar. They want to know, what should you do if a parent never returns your phone calls or emails? Kyle?
Thanks for this, Omar. Yeah, sometimes we run into these types of difficulties. So this is one reason that's really important to keep that parent contact log. So you can note in that log when parents do not answer your calls, when they do not return them, when they do not return your emails. But something that you also need to keep in mind is sometimes the school doesn't always have the most accurate, up-to-date information. You know, people change their phone numbers, people change their emails. I would check at the front desk to see if they had any updated information, and if it's not any different there, then you should speak with the student. It's always great to send like a contact information letter home, especially towards the first of the year, but you can do it at any time and try to make sure that you do have their correct telephone number and you do have their correct email address. So thank you for that question, Umar.
And our next question comes from Joshua. How can I deal with a parent who's being very mean and accusatory? Ryan, have you run into something like this before?
Well, Joshua, first of all, certainly it's a difficult situation. And I think above all else, when you have a parent who is being mean, accusatory, just unpleasant, the first thing that you want to do is remember that you are a professional educator and you never have to return those kind of emotions or exhibit that behavior yourself. Really important to keep it professional. Second thing that you need to do in this case is to make sure you partner with your administration so that they're aware of what's going on. Okay, now let's talk about how you deal directly with the parent. In the episode, there was a great way to help safeguard yourself against some of these things, and that is that parent log. You can show communication with them, times you've tried to communicate. I think that one thing you can do additionally is make sure that when you have meetings, you want to have someone else in there with you, perhaps colleague, administrator, and just state of the facts. Look at student performance, look at what's been done in the class, continue to be professional, and you will get through it, Joshua. Thank you.
All right, and thank you, Ryan. I think that's all the questions we have time for today. All right, everyone, Launch Your Classroom will return in 3 weeks on November the 30th at 4 p.m. Eastern. The most effective teachers know how important it is to keep misbehavior responses in the classroom. But what happens when you need to escalate a situation to the administration or guidance offices? Join us next time for Discipline Referrals. To get the most out of our next episode, make sure you use the link in the description below to head over to Amazon.com and check out our Launch Your Classroom ebook series. These ebooks are packed with tips, infographics, instructional videos, and so much more. The first book in the series, Launch Your Classroom, Building a Foundation for Learning, is available now. And remember, to stay up to date on all the free professional development that EPI offers, why not subscribe to our YouTube channel? And while you're at it, click the bell icon to receive notifications when we go live. Have a great weekend, everyone. We'll see you in 3 weeks.